Hello, everybody. This is Atul Krishna Das, and welcome to another episode of Ashram Talks. In previous episodes, we were talking about karma yoga, and I think at this point, many of us will be thinking, okay, how can I devote every single of my task in every day to God, to live in a way that is more meaningful? And we can feel like there are daily challenges because of the senses, because of temptations and things that we think we have to do. And today we're going to cover about how to deal with those situations. And in order to do that, we're going to be joined today again by the wonderful Chandramukhi Barrie. Hello.
Hi. Hi, Krishna. Nice to be here. Nice to see you again. So, today welcome everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Ashram Talks. Today is a beautiful, beautiful verse that really dives into the heart of how one can attain happiness and contentment. And the last few verses have all been talking about the need to control the senses because sense enjoyment is the cause of bondage. And when we control the senses, we'll be free. But how does that happen? And that's what we'll be discussing in this verse. How when we in our deepest inner recesses of our heart, if we're experiencing deep contentment and satisfaction and a higher taste than what we are searching for through our senses, then that's actually, the natural way that automatically our tendencies to enjoy in this world will be controlled. So, as is the tradition of ancient India, I will begin with a Mangalacharana before we do start this verse, and then we'll go straight into this verse, which is chapter 2, verse 59. So I'm just praying to the lotus feet of my beloved divine master and all of our masters in our lineage of spiritual teachers. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shishimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so let's look at this verse today, and we go to the verse here. So Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param dristva nivartate. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment through the taste for though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So, if we just look at the context of this verse, about 5 verses back in text 54, Arjuna has come to the point of asking his dear friend Krishna, who is the soul of the universe. He says, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? So these are questions that he's asking. What is it that someone who is situated in pure consciousness, how does he move? How does he live his life or her life? And the last few verses have just been describing the importance of controlling the senses, and how the senses actually, we're all in a body. We all have 5 senses, and until we come on a spiritual path, we think we are those senses, and we try to enjoy this world in one way or another. And the objects of the senses, which means those things that we want to taste in this world, like delicious food, or hearing nice music, or being in the company of the opposite sex, or there's so many different enjoyments that are pulling our senses to try and enjoy matter, basically, and to help us become more and more identified with our false self. Um, so the senses are taking us here, taking us there, giving us a false sense of, um, you know, false sense of satisfaction, an illusory sense of satisfaction. That, oh, you can, and that is the nature of this material world. Oh, you will find happiness here, or you'll find happiness there. But Krishna is teaching Arjuna, and thereby teaching the whole world, that if we become fixed in consciousness and not become perturbed by the dualities, by happiness and distress, by victory and defeat, by unaffected by the good that comes or the evil that comes, and be a steady mind. But then in this verse, he's taking it a little deeper, that saying, well, actually, if you try to control the senses just by controlling them, it's actually impossible. So an example is given of, well, what if you tried to stop eating? You can't, right? You can't just stop eating or you'll die. And so if we're trying to just control the senses, so Krishna is saying in this verse, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. Um, our Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada gives a beautiful example of this, that someone, or sorry, I should say practical. I wouldn't say it's beautiful, but it's a practical example. If someone is sick and they go to the doctor and they can't eat properly, their digestion is having major troubles, the doctor says to him, you can't eat solid food for now, and you need to follow this particular diet, and then gradually you'll get your digestive power back and you'll be able to eat again. And uh, then that person is with their family members, their brother or sister, or their family, their husband, wife, and they're eating normally. And that person just really wants to eat. I've actually had this experience myself this year, being a mother of a 6-year-old and having to provide all these delicious foods for her. And I actually had some digestive troubles. And you really want to eat. So the taste for that, it's still there, but you can't, because you know that if I do, then I'm going to get sick, or I'm going to, there's that fear there. So just restricting sense enjoyment doesn't work. Abstinence actually doesn't work. And actually, there's many people on different spiritual paths who actually try for very many lifetimes to, or again and again, to try and, because we can understand that when we engage in sense enjoyment, when we try to enjoy this world, we get the reactions, and the we think, well, okay, then that means I need to become detached. I need to stop trying to enjoy this world. But trying to stop it by force doesn't actually lead to spiritual involvement. It actually just leads to frustration. And you end up wanting to enjoy even more because you're just so restricting yourself. Um, and so then how is it, will one be able to do this? And is describing that if we're able to real transformation happens not through suppressing the senses, not through abstinence, not through forcibly stopping the senses, but awakening to something higher and sweeter. And that's very practical to be understood in all kinds of different ways. Like if we give a child may have picked up a knife, a young child, and it's dangerous for the child. And if you try to take that knife off them, it could be dangerous because they could hurt themselves. But if you give them an ice cream and say, "Oh, here you go, take this," then they'll just the um, give up the knife and go for the ice cream. Um, and so, that's our situation. If we're given something higher, then we automatically want it. Another example that my spiritual master, Shishima Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, would give is that if you try to take air out of a jar or a pot, you try and get it with your hands and pull the air. It's impossible, right? But if you put water in the jar, then automatically the air will go out. So, what is that? What is that higher taste? What is that will bring real contentment? And I've called the topic of today from craving to contentment. Actually, craving enjoyment is the natural tendency of the soul. We're all meant for bliss, for love, for happiness, and that's just like consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Our need for happiness is also a symptom of the soul, because actually that's what we're meant for. But we're meant for a happiness that is in the realm of the soul and not just in the realm of the body, through the senses. And enjoyment through the senses actually ultimately is not satisfying. And so, forgetting our true nature, we've indulged in sense enjoyment for so many lifetimes, getting bitten by the wasps and drones of the reactions of our past deeds. But when we're situated in the soul's, the self-realization, and this is what Krishna is teaching. When we're situated in self-realization, then automatically happiness comes. But it is not that's something that developing a higher taste is about developing the taste of the soul. And what is the taste of the soul? As we've discussed so many times, that the soul is part and parcel of God. And who is God? One of his names is Krishna. There's many different names: Allah, Buddha, Jehovah. And the name Krishna means Krishna. You break it down, and Kri means to attract, and Shna means to immerse in bliss. Krishna is also translated as, the word Krishna is translated as the reservoir of pleasure. Now, I don't know if we really even contemplate those words, the reservoir of pleasure in this world. Where is the reservoir of pleasure, of all unending pleasure that cannot be experienced in this world? That is far beyond far beyond the experience of relief from suffering, for example. We may experience so much pleasure when our suffering is taken away. And it's a bit like when if you've been dunked under the water and you can't get out, and then all of a sudden you come out and take a breath and you feel so much relief. And often we equate that with happiness and joy. When we don't have any problems. Oh gosh, this week I don't have any problems. I don't have to think of it. I'm on a holiday, or I don't have to think of this or that. But ultimately that is not really satisfying the soul either. That is like, that's just a temporary thing. But real satisfaction of the soul comes in connection with the source of all souls, the source of all pleasure. And that pleasure, we actually can't imagine what amount of ecstasy and pleasure that is available to the soul in loving connection with God. I just want to read this very beautiful section by Srila Bhakti Rakshakshita Goswami Maharaj. He says, the title is His Magical Touch, describing connection with Krishna. Like the touchstone turning iron into gold, the lowest receives the highest position by the magical touch of that sweet, all-wonderful substance, and he is called Krishna, beauty personified, who can harmonize the most undesirable base nature of this world simply through contact with his holy name. Everyone wants pleasure. All are searching after happiness, but they do not know how to search it out properly. What is true lasting pleasure? A scientific search of pleasure or bliss will reveal Krishnanusandana. All seeking will culminate in him, the emporium of all rasas, the epitome of all taste, the combination of all different types of that pleasing substance that can alone supply ecstasy, love, and harmony with us. So we're all seeking this love, but we're seeking ecstasy. And that's why we, ultimately are trying to enjoy in this world. And ultimately the connection between man and woman, trying to find that through sexual interaction, drives the whole world, and it's a like a minute of the ecstasy that we're meant for. The ecstasy that we're meant for in loving connection with Krishna, who is the abode of ecstasy, is compared to like a great ocean compared to the water in a calf's footprint that is like liberation or freedom from suffering. And we actually can't imagine what we're meant for. And such a connection with Krishna from the beginning brings the most contentment that we cannot even find anywhere else. And I know those of you who have, found that connection with God in your life, or even begun to find it, as soon as we pray to God, a deep peace comes in our heart. Actually, my mum used to tell me this when I was young. I'd be having troubles at school as a teenager, and she used to say, "Just pray." And when you know your prayers are heard, when you feel peaceful. And so I remember doing that and then feeling that, and then gradually it's a working relationship that you can gradually develop with that dearest friend who's right with us, next to us, in our heart, inside, outside, everything, and who is so kind and loving, who's always waiting for us to just turn our face towards him. And so it's from the beginning just developing that faith in God, faith in his presence with us, how he is always with us, he never leaves us. Then that faith can develop into love. And then we learning to love God and act under his will. And then when we align ourselves with the will of divinity, of the will of the soul of the universe, and that then we're acting for universal interest and our own interest rather than our selfish whim. So Arjuna on the battlefield here, he's faced with having to kill his family members and his friends and so forth who are on the opposite side. And in a way, he's acting to control his senses. He says, "I shall not fight." But then after hearing the Bhagavad Gita from Shri Krishna, he says, "I will fight," because he's learning how to use his senses according to the will of divinity rather than his own selfish whim. Srila Prabhupada gives the example on a lecture describing this verse that you can find on the internet. So many nice lectures you can find on the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam describing these verses even more clearly. And so he describes that Krishna is, sorry, I'm just going to find it here. I've got my notes. So Arjuna is saying, "I won't fight." But then after he hears from Krishna, he will fight because he's acting under the will of the Lord. So this is the example I was just finding. So Srila Prabhupada says that if you're killing thousands in a war and it's under a superior order, then you're rewarded. So if you're a warrior and you're acting according to a higher authority, then you're rewarded, and everyone's so happy because you've achieved what the country is set out to achieve. But if you kill one person on your own whim, then it's considered murder and you're punished. So we're always concocting all kinds of different ways of plans for our own enjoyment by our own whims. And when we manufacture plans by our mental concoction, we using our senses for our own whims, then that equals bondage, as we've discussed before. That leads to the cycle of karma, birth, death, and going through all of our different experiences with karmic reactions. And when we learn how to use our senses for the service of the Lord, then automatically we are situated in freedom from bondage. And it's a gradual process, but it is all about developing a higher taste to give up the lower taste. And it is true, with real detachment, then we'll be free from the desire for sense enjoyment. But real detachment comes from voluntarily giving up the senses and not by forcibly giving up the objects of the senses. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a few beautiful verses, which is another great literature that after reading Bhagavad Gita, then it's good to go then to the great literature of Srimad Bhagavatam that takes all the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita into even more practical understandings through so many histories, stories, and really deepening that knowledge that's there. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a few beautiful verses that describe how when we awaken attachment to God and start living our life as an offering for the soul of the universe and engaging our senses in pleasing Him, then this verse says, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashavairagyam Gyanam Cha Yad Ahaitukam. By rendering devotional service, this is a translation of that verse, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So, as we were saying, you put water in the pot, automatically air comes out. So when we're engaging and connecting with God and trying to align with Him, then automatically there's detachment from the world and real knowledge develops. What kind of knowledge? That who am I? I am a spirit soul. I am spirit. I am not matter. This body is a dress, and I am meant for spiritual happiness, spiritual connection, and spiritual love. Not meant for this matter. So real knowledge starts to awaken. And then there's another verse, which is one of my favorite verses. Bhakti Paresh Anubhava Virakti Anyatra Chaisa Trika Eka Kala. So in this verse, it's describing in Srimad Bhagavatam that what is the result of developing faith and then starting to live one's life with practically engaging your hands, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your actions, and our words, our desires, and gradually having them under the guidance of our very dear loving friend Krishna in our heart. Then what do you experience? And this is what this verse is describing, that in the same way that, so just when somebody's very, very hungry, if you haven't eaten food all day, for example, or you're so hungry, you've got a burning appetite. What happens when you start to eat food? You start to feel pleasure, you start to feel nourishment, and that relief from hunger comes. So as you eat each bite of that food, then you just start feeling so enlivened. You feel relief, you feel pleasure, you feel nourished, and you feel like, oh, your hunger's going away and you feel satisfied. So in the similar way, when we start connecting with the Lord in our life, with our nearest and dearest friend, Shri Krishna, then devotion, direct experience of the Lord, and detachment from other things come simultaneously as we take shelter. And just like, and it's describing just like in the same way, pleasure, nourishment, relief from hunger come. So we actually all hunger. We all have so much hunger in us, so much craving for love, craving for enjoyment. And that is our nature because we are part and parcel of God. And He's the reservoir of all pleasure and all kinds of enjoyment. And so it's natural for us to be craving this. But when we crave it in a way that is self-centered, that is using our misusing our independence and exploiting others, then we're always frustrated, and we're always in the mode of it's described in the mode of rajas, or always hankering and lamenting, always wishing that we had something that we don't, looking around us and seeing, oh, somebody else has something, so there's envy, and I should have that, or why are they happy and why am I not happy? And so we're in this this state of influenced by the mode of ignorance and passion, where we're forgetful of ourselves and forgetful of our true nature. And then as we start to lift our consciousness through connection, through devotional service, it's described through bhakti yoga, uniting our consciousness with God and through loving acts that please God, then our consciousness becomes uplifted out of those modes, out of those, and automatically we want to give them up because we're feeling nourished and satisfied within. Our hunger is satisfied. And so that is where real contentment comes, in devotion, in loving relationship with the Lord. And that can be done by, that can be, we can engage all of our senses in those things that nourish the soul, that relieve that hunger. And one of those is, and we can think, okay, well, we're talking about controlling the senses. Well, how can I use my ears, my tongue, my nose, my eyes, my body? How will they be used in the service of the Lord? And it's a work in progress. It's a practice that can be done every day. And we can remind ourselves every day by hearing about Sri Krishna and his transcendental form and activities. In the Vedic literatures, the understanding, the Krishna conception of God gives so much detail. There's other faiths, like Christianity, for example, gives hints of our divine nature and that there is a kingdom of God. But the Krishna conception of God gives a very detailed experience of who is God, what does he do, how does he play, what does he look like, what is his personality. And he has a loving personality that with unlimited divine qualities, and is so kind, and he's actually missing his. We've forgotten our eternal relationship with him, and he's feeling. It's described that he's actually feeling separation from us. Why? Now we think billions and billions of living entities in this world, right? And this is only one little planet in comparison to the universe. Every one of the living entities, the billions of microbes and bugs that are inside and outside everything, right? That you can't even see. Every one of those has a spirit soul with a eternal loving relationship with Krishna that living entity is forgotten about. The trees, the animals, the human beings, every living thing inside those living entities is a beautiful spiritual being with spiritual senses, and meant for a loving experience that goes on eternally and not always frustrated like this world. And so when we can hear about the nature of the Lord and how he's so loving and sweet, and how he has these beautiful exchanges with his friends, with his family members, and we are of him. We are actually his family member. We've forgotten this. We have a beautiful spiritual form that has senses like our form that we have now, with hands and legs, and a beautiful form. But in our spiritual nature, when we realize our spiritual form as we progress through this path of bhakti yoga, here watering this faith. First of all, it starts with faith, or shraddha. And when we hear about Krishna, we chant, use our tongue to chant his names and speak about the reality rather than the illusion. When we use our eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna and saintly devotees, and transferring our vision so that we see everything through the spiritual vision rather than the material vision, that rather than in trying to enjoy our family members or others around us, seeing that, everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. And gradually our whole consciousness can become transformed with this journey to a higher taste. And it starts in the beginning. That higher taste even starts in the beginning, just through that feeling of peace and contentment in knowing that God is my friend, he is my protector, he is with me, and is always looking out for my welfare. And if I connect with him every day And so then that gradually, that faith, we can water that faith just like a plant needs watering. And when that faith develops, it's described that it's like a seed that becomes planted in the heart, but that seed needs to sprout, and it needs the right water in order to sprout. And I think I've spoken about this in a previous class, how when we plant so many seeds every day that create different desires for enjoyment in this world, but the seed of bhakti, or the seed of love, needs cultivation as well. And when we begin on the path and this faith develops, even if it's just a little bit of faith, that faith can be increased, just like if you have a little fire and you can blow on it and put more wood to the fire, and then that fire will grow into a big fire. So the little spark of Shraddha, or a little spark of faith that develops, needs very careful protection. And we can protect that actually, one, by being with others who have that faith as well. That's one way that our faith is nourished in a very powerful way. And that by finding others, and that, I'm speaking on the internet here and to different people from all over the world, but all of us, we do have community around us. The internet is in some ways a bit disconnecting, but it's connecting for when we don't have those in person to meet with. But the power of being with others physically, not just through the internet, being with others physically who have this faith, is so powerful to help that faith and love grow. And when we're only with others who don't do that, then it's easy for that to get wavered. So being around others who are of the same, wanting to go forward in our devotional life, in our walk towards God on a daily basis. And then these three things, there's actually 64 angas, or different processes that one can engage one's life into, to connect with God and gradually have that taste develop, that higher taste develop. But three of the main ones, and they're very scientific if we think about it: hearing, chanting, remembering. And we do this on a daily basis. We hear about things, we chant about things, or we speak. Chanting can also just mean whatever you're doing with your speech. So here, every day we're hearing stories about, just if we're watching the news, or we're talking to friends, or we're at work, we hear about this, we hear about that. And what do you go home and think about? Whatever conversations you had that day, or whatever you heard that day. Then you start thinking about it. And so hearing, speaking, and remembering, and then you become absorbed in it. And our absorption is what takes us forward in different avenues of life. And if we're only material absorbed in hearing and speaking about material things, then we're always going to be absorbed in matter, and our material desires and desire for enjoyment will just increase. So then our teachers are saying, well, you can actually just dovetail whatever you're doing and be Krishna conscious in whatever you're doing. So hear about Krishna and the activities, and that's where these beautiful scriptures of ancient India give like enough information to hear about all day, every day, forever. The transcendental activities and pastimes and teachings of Krishna and his loving associates. When we hear, our faith gets stronger. And then when we hear, we're going to, and we speak those things and engage our speech in those things, like we're doing today, actually, in these classes, then we're going to remember. And so then we're going to be absorbed in Krishna more and more. And it's a very purifying, powerful process that clears out our desires for enjoyment in this world, and gradually fills us up with nourishment, with inner peace and happiness, joy, clarity on how to act. And it's all there by going to the core. And so just finishing off with what we started with this verse, Um, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense enjoyment, sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste is fixed in consciousness. So by engaging our by developing that inner connection and inner higher taste and connection with God, then we become fixed in consciousness, and automatically our senses and our desire for material enjoyment will be controlled. So I'll finish there. And if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to contribute them.
Thank you so much for that wonderful piece of wisdom. Not only because it made us reflect a lot, at least in my case, it did in that way, but also because you provided like actual practical steps that we could do, like try to, engage in community with other people that are looking and searching for Krishna everywhere. And if you don't know where to start, you can always try to look for somebody who knows a little bit more and can teach a little bit, a guru or somebody who can guide you on how to interact and how to look for it too. Or just to try to look for God in your own way, in your own life. Step by step things that we can do every single day. And I think that's something that we can take with us and practice. Um, Oh, let me see if we have in here. Um, Thank you, Pablo, so much for your comment. It seems we do not have any additional questions for today. So thank you again so much for being here with us. Everybody, remember, we are live every Monday at 7:30 p.m. and every Thursday, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a wonderful day. Hare Krishna.